Chelsea Council. Well, with us now is Joe Delaney from the Grenfell Residents Action Group. Joe, thank you very much for coming in. So we've had a number of resignations. As we heard, Nicholas Paget-Brown, his deputy, as well, has said he'll stand down. What's your reaction to their decisions at this point?
I mean, I suspected that something like this was going to happen, but I just see it as yet another cynical move. If they really felt genuine remorse, they would resign as councillors and trigger by-elections in their respective wards, and then let their constituents decide whether they are fit and proper to continue in office.
What would you say to the argument that they should stay and oversee this being sorted out?
I think at the moment, given the fact that there is an ongoing investigation and the inquiry is about to start, I think it's a mistake for them to remain in place because there could be a clear conflict of interest. I mean, the deputy one, Rockfielding Mellon, was responsible for housing for several years. So I don't see it as fair that he has the advantage of internal documents and internal resources to call upon when he needs them, you know, when the residents at the moment can't even call upon services from the council that they desperately require.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has called on Theresa May to appoint independent commissioners to come in and run the council for quite some time. How helpful would that be?
I think that would serve Theresa May's interests more than it would serve local residents now.
How?
Well, I mean, the executive of the council, so that's basically the council staff themselves, they go by the policies that are set by the cabinet. I wouldn't consider them as culpable as, say, the cabinet, who are giving them direction. Whilst I can see the logic behind there being independent people coming in, I do think that will just waste valuable time at the moment in trying to coordinate a relief effort. Personally, I think more of their frontline staff should be promoted to roles that are responsible for overseeing things, and they should also involve more local groups such as the Real Community, who've been on the ground since minute one.
So that really ties into the other part of what Sadiq Khan said, where he says he feels that not only does there need to be a change in leadership, but in leadership style and a very different approach in how a council engages with the people it serves.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't say how a council engages. I would say how Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea has engaged. I mean, if you look at the response in Camden, it's been, you know, it's complete opposite. You know, that their councillors have been out on the ground meeting people from day one. When they evacuated residents, their staff were out on the ground meeting residents. But
there was even criticism of that, though, wasn't there? Because people they had it sprung upon them last week on a Friday night when it was late in the day. I mean, some people were asked to leave in the middle of the night, but they were not happy with that.
I mean, yeah, their response wasn't perfect, you know, but I mean, slight incompetence is better than the wall of indifference that residents in K&C have faced up to now. And in future, I think I will just call them Kensington and Chelsea. I don't think they deserve the title of Royal Borough any further.
There are these documents that the BBC has seen which show that a decision was taken to use cheaper, less fire-resistant cladding on the block, thereby saving hundreds of thousands of pounds. There's no suggestion that a decision was deliberately made to cut fire safety, but it certainly was cheaper.
No, but the decision was certainly hubristic, wasn't it? You know, they knew that this other material was far safer, and yet they thought it was a risk worth taking. You know, I very much doubt they would take the same risk in their own homes or in the council buildings that they work in.
The other issue is the scope of the inquiry, and as soon as this retired appeal court judge, Sir Martin Moore-Bick, was appointed, there was concern about whether he was the most appropriate person to chair it. And now Jeremy Corbyn has said that he wants to see the scope widened. What kind of scope do you think it needs?
I totally agree. I met Sir Martin yesterday morning at 10 a.m. in I think it was the first meeting he held with residents, and we raised various concerns about the scope of the inquiry and also his background and whether he was someone who was sort of competent to handle an investigation of the magnitude and scope that we were hoping for. He played down our concerns in the meetings, so I was already somewhat sceptical. And then after meeting several residents' groups, he said that he didn't think that he'd be able to do anything that would satisfy us because of the terms of reference, which supposedly haven't been agreed yet.
No, and there has been a statement from 10 Downing Street in the last few minutes saying that the Prime Minister will respond to Jeremy Corbyn's letter in due course. He's calling for an interim report by September. But also that Theresa May has been clear that survivors and victims' families should be consulted on the terms of reference and will have their voices heard throughout the inquiry. You're kind of laughing at that.
I am laughing because the letter that we issued to Theresa May, she didn't even bother to reply to before Sir Martin was appointed. You know, her reply was given via the Daily Telegraph and then was sort of distributed that way. She didn't even have the grace to reply to our letter directly. So she can talk, but frankly, nothing she says at the moment carries any weight or respect with any of the residents in the area whatsoever. We've been told that it was a couple of £100,000 that were shaved off the bill. You know, at that time, Theresa May seems quite willing to pay £1.5 billion in order to stay in her home in Downing Street. Perhaps if we moved the estate to Northern Ireland, we would get some of the attention that we deserve.
This is the money that there's been promised to Northern Ireland as a result of the agreement that she's come to with the DUP. What then should be added to the terms of reference? Because at the moment it's how the fire started, how it spread so quickly, and efforts to try to stop it ever happening again. What should be added to those terms?
Well, you see, I think if we stick with those terms, it will just become a debate about cladding. Whilst, I mean, the 100% failure rate of every block that's been tested is extremely horrifying and concerning, particularly for the residents who live in those blocks, I think that there are wider issues of concern here. People in the local area, the Grenfell Action Group that I was involved with, and other residents in the area were complaining about the proposed regeneration and rebuilds in our area since 2011 and 12. And it always seems that any council that issues a consultation will issue what they believe should happen, then they open it to the public, supposedly for our input, and then at the end of it, the conclusions they reach are exactly what they proposed in the first place. And I think that sort of thing needs to change.
And that needs to be part of an inquiry?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. Because again, it's about resident engagement. We warned that this would happen, and we were accused of scaremongering. You know, we didn't want cladding on the tower block. None of the residents of the tower block wanted cladding, and yet the main concern seemed to be to beautify the building rather than actually make any substantial changes to its structure.
In terms of the inquiry then, some of what the residents appear to want Sir Martin Moore-Bick to cover will surely be dealt with by a criminal investigation, and necessarily to ensure that that isn't prejudiced, the inquiry needs to keep away from that.
I don't think it does. I mean, look, we had an inquiry into the London riots at the same time that people were rounded up and locked up for rioting. You know, that there have been lots of inquiries that have run parallel with criminal investigations in the past, and as long as they're appropriately handled and there is the political will behind them to ensure that they are appropriately handled, these things seem to be able to, you know, run quite competently. I don't see what the difference is here, apart from the fact...
You wouldn't be worried about a potential criminal action being prejudiced as a result of information coming out in a public inquiry?
No, I mean, the Hillsborough inquiries actually led to criminal charges being brought against various people. You know, the police investigations didn't lead anywhere, did they? So frankly, I would rather there be as much focus and attention on this matter as possible. And then, you know, we can work out the details afterwards. I don't see why one would immediately prejudice the other.
Jo Delaney from the Grenfell Residents Action Group, thank you very much.
Thank you.